Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. I am Moody and I'm a 3D artist with over 10 years of experience ranging from sculpting, texturing, rigging, animation and animation direction. In this video I'm going to break down my process for sculpting something like the model you can see on screen. This won't be a tutorial in the classic sense of the word. I'm going to try and explain what I'm doing as a breakdown while in a voiceover while the time lapse plays out. So if you do find this content helpful, then please like, subscribe, share this video, and with all that being said, let's get into it and start sculpting this Simpsons mashup. Okay, so one of the first things you want to do is make sure you've got some decent reference. I've chosen some artwork with some good construction lines on it to give me an idea of shapes and forms, and then just start adding, building up the forms of the sculpt using spheres and cylinders and the tube tool. Like, a lot of this is to give you a base to work from, and what you're really concentrating on here is overall forms and mass and things like that. You don't want to be working on something that's completely wrong and pushing in the wrong direction with it. So here you can see that I started moving in the body a bit more at the top there. I realised I was sculpting in the clothing and I didn't need that because, well, he's going to be dressed as a Spartan, so he's going to be wearing very little clothing, to be honest. So yeah, again, just adding the shapes together, you know, building the forms, making sure everything's proportionately correct. I do block out the other characters, like the two Bart's sisters, and I do block out Marge. They don't get used. The whole thing just started taking too long, and I wanted to get the video out and just see how you guys respond to it. So it's going to be a lot of the same here. Like I said, you're doing a lot of this for the forms and the mass and just the general shape of the characters. It really doesn't have to be detailed stuff. So I'll let this time-lapse play out for a little while. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with all of those blockouts there. I'm going to move on to Homer now, and again, I like to try and bring my sculpts, or at least the parts of the sculpts that are together, I like to try and bring those up at a similar time, so you're going to see me flick between Homer and Selma for a little while here. But again, I'm just, you know, merging the shapes using voxel merge, and then using the Dino topology tool to fill in the gaps, smooth out any errors. The Dino topology tool is great for this because, you know, if you lower the resolution down, it literally smooths out an entire gap, which you'll see in a little bit, where I'll start working on the back of his leg near his butt cheeks. But yeah, the Dino topology tool is great for this. Yeah, adding some weight to him, just adding the fat to where it needs to be. So I'm masking off some underpants for Homer here. I don't actually end up using these underpants because it just wasn't a clean extraction, and I think that's to do with the crease where his leg meets his belly. I just wasn't happy with the extraction, so I leave it for now, but I'll come back to this and fix it properly in a little while. Again, the tube tool to make hands, really simple stuff, and then voxel merge and smooth out with Dino topology. I'll be honest and say I wasn't 100% confident with this sculpt at this point, but the more I got into this part of it by adding the flesh to Homer and, you know, the weighty parts, I started to gain a bit more confidence in the sculpt. I feel like about here I started to realise it was going to be okay. He still looks a bit strange to me, but I was more confident. We're going to add the cape. When I do things like clothing, depending on the clothing, I'll add a sphere, sculpt it into the shape what I want. At least one edge or one surface of it will be the shape I want, and then I'll mask out the area, and depending on how far away it is from the skin, I'll extract inwards rather than outwards, just to save myself a lot of moving mesh around and things like that, you know. Same with the sword. Mark out, drop a shape in there and pull it around using the move tool. Trim away the bits to make it at the bottom to make it look like it's got a sharp edge. It's very simple stuff. I'm really, honestly, just blocking things out here. I'm not spending an awful lot of time on any of this stuff right now. Adding the T. Again, easy, simple stuff. There's nothing really detailed about these things. They're very cartoony. I'll add these. I'll join these together, and I'll duplicate these. Every single character has the same set of teeth, except for Bart. Again, slowly bringing up detail and just cleaning up areas that start to look a bit off to me. Here we go with the easiest hair sculpt I've ever done in my life. So very quickly there, added some toe shapes in, and here we go here we are extracting the mesh that I was talking about earlier. So masking off the cape and extracting inwards to bring it closer to the body. Same with the straps here. I believe these are to hold the sword, but we never really see that part of the outfit, so I just add the straps in and I call it done. At this point I move on to Selma, because getting to a certain point with Homer where I was confident in the sculpt and the general shape of it, so I move on to Selma just to make sure that this part of the sculpt, these are the two characters that interact together, make sure they work well as a form and as a sculpt. So a lot of the same stuff here I'm going to be doing, merging, smoothing, just adding form and weight where she needs it. So something I did differently with Selma, again another easy hair sculpt, sorry. One of the things I did differently with Selma was I actually sculpted a lot of her weight and a lot of her form before I posed her. And again, it's because I wasn't confident in sculpting these types of characters. I've not really done it before. So you can see I split, using the split tool, I separate her out into all of the relevant pieces, and I start posing her from here, and then I'll re-sculpt and re-add the form. Again, like I said, flicking between the two sculpts just to tidy up some areas. Here's the extraction for the underpants, which I feel is like a lot cleaner. It came out a lot smoother and just less artifacts in it. I did with the sandals try and extract them using a mask, but it just really wasn't a clean extraction, so I ended up going back to what I know and just adding the shapes and using the tube tool to add the detail for the extra straps here. So I think this came out better. Here's a mistake that I made. Another great way to use the dyno topology is I somehow managed to cut a section out into the middle there. So I really low resolution on the dyno topology tool, smoothed out the edges where the holes were, and then it left a piece in the middle, which I was then able to separate the mesh and then just delete the extra pieces, and then still have the smooth surface. Again, here another extraction for the sole of the sandals. I had a bit of a weird issue there. I really don't know what that is, so I ended up deleting that and doing a fresh extraction. It just came out a bit cleaner. duplicate the sandal here. I'm not going to keep resculpting something that's already done. I think I duplicated the foot as well and switched that over there. Simple stuff with the eyelids, duplicate the spheres and use the trim tool to cut a piece out the middle. I'll merge them to his skull, to his skin later, to make it look a bit more cleaner and a bit more organic. Sculpting a buckle here really easily. I did try and use the trim tool, but it just looked weird, so I went to a super low resolution and just pulled some points around using the mask tool and the widget. Just adding some creases and contact with the skin. To make it look a bit more organic, a little bit of a clean up on the stomach, and then finishing off the easiest hair sculpt I've ever had to do in my life. Like I said, loved it. I had the snapping on for that. When you're doing the top piece of the hair, I'd probably just make the shape and then move it into position using the widget tool. The snap function can be a bit of a pain sometimes. So using the boolean, I chop out the section of her mouth. It's just a bit faster than actually trying to pull shapes around and sculpt into it. Simple perm here, these are just spheres that I've blobbed on there. It's a simple cartoony perm, we all know what her hair looks like. There we go with the duplicated teeth. Use the whole buffalo, guys, don't waste time sculpting something that you already have. All of these characters in The Simpsons have got basically the same few mouth shapes and teeth shapes for when they speak, so there's no need to keep sculpting stuff over. Same story, adding forms, duplicating Homer's feet, because again, why sculpt something if you already have it, right? So I sculpt, copy his feet over. So I copy his feet over and I merge them, and using the Dino topology tool, smooth it all out. Same deal with the clothes. I'm going to get a rough shape of what I want, and I'm going to use the mask tool and then extract some fresh new mesh from it to create the clothes that we see in the reference. Again, this isn't an exact copy of anything in the reference. This is easy, simple stuff. I just want it to look like she's wearing those types of clothes. I'm nowhere near close to what they're actually wearing, but we all get the idea, so I think that's an important thing to note. Depending on the type of sculpt, you don't need to be 100% accurate with it, particularly with a cartoony sculpt like this. That's why these ones are so much fun to do. Same thing here with the cape. I'm going to roughly sculpt in one surface of it to look like the cape I want, and then mask it out and extract inwards towards the sculpt so that I don't have to move it all around with the move tool. Clean up the edges with Dino Topo and everything like that. It's a super handy tool, and I think this is where Nomad excels for me. I absolutely love using their Dino topology. Same again, you're going to see me duplicate those sandals a lot because there are 4 characters. It might be cheating, but I doubt it. Work on her hands a little here, add a bit of flesh to them and a bit of volume. They were looking a bit like Bender's fingers from Futurama, so quick simple sculpt of a cigarette as well. I imagine her spitting it out as he kicks her down the hole, so I wanted to put that in there. Plus it's Patty and Selma, they smoke. So yeah, relatively happy with that. I'm going to move on to Bart now. I think I'm going to let some of this time lapse play out because aside from his hair, there are really no changes, and I wasn't happy with how his hair came out, so I redid it and basically just masked off a few areas at the top, really smoothed that out dramatically, and then inverted it and lifted up the mesh to make it look like it was one piece of geometry, because when I added the cones to it, it looked like cones stuck on the top of his head and it just really didn't look good. So you know, here. Wasn't happy with this, so like I said, used the mask function and pulled up some geometry from that. It got cut out of the edit for some reason, but yeah, because this is a lot of the same, duplicating and copying parts over that I need, and I'm just going to let this part of the sculpt play out. I'll let the time lapse play out. So here I was able to actually get a clean extraction using the mask because there were no contact points between his thigh and his belly. So the extraction actually came out pretty clean, and I went with that. The buckle. Why waste time sculpting something you already have? I'm going to do the same with Patty, I believe is the other sister. So I'm going to duplicate Selma, drag her over, and using the split tool, cut her into the portions and repose. They're twin sisters and they're identical size and shape, so yeah, why sculpt the whole thing over again? Again, with the Dino Topology tool, absolutely love how quickly you can smooth out areas with this and then bring the detail back. It's just such a great tool. I would say the main tools I use for sculpting in Nomad would be the clay tool, the move tool, the mask tool. I use the crease tool quite a bit as well, but again, not on this one because it's a super simple sculpt. Shape here, and I just duplicate the hair over again and start moving that around with the move tool, and then all I've got to really do is add a few extra bobbles for the perm, you know. Clean up there where there was some contact, and here where there's some holes that you can see. So I'll start working on the base here. I changed this up quite a bit towards the end. I just feel like there was a lot of space being taken up by the base, so I end up putting a texture map on my brush and extracting out the paving shape. But you can see here when I cut it off, there's a lot of space taken up by that base, and I end up correcting that in a little bit and splitting it into 2 bases. It just makes the sculpt feel cleaner and a bit less cluttered. So back to Homer's cape, there's some detail I forgot on it. If you're going to do that onto a thin surface, I would make sure that one-sided or two-sided sculpting is off, so you're only sculpting on one surface. So moving on to the colour, I'm just going to add the solid base colours onto it to get an idea of how this is going to look. Now we're going to go in and paint a bit of detail in. Because these are simple cartoony characters, I'm just going to paint these details into the mouth here. And it's going to be the same when I do the skin. There we go, you see a bit of blue going in around the beard and things like that. Some red on the ears. I'd say anywhere that's red, there's going to be a lot of veins close to the surface, like capillaries and blood vessels. So a red nose, and you know, when you get embarrassed you get a red chest, you know, so there'll be red there. And I'll add blue or deep purple in areas where I feel like there needs to be shadow, or where there are blue veins running through, like on the wrist. I'll paint a bit of blue in there just to make it look like you can see the veins underneath. But you know, it's just to add a bit of texture under the top layer of skin. So I'll go base layer, reds, blues and yellows. The yellows are for where there's bone and fat, and then I'll put a top layer on and lower the transparency so we can see some of the colours I've painted. With the sandals and the clothing, I'll usually add edge wear, and because this is such a simple sculpt and a simple cartoony character, I don't think you need to worry too much about this. You know, it can be pretty rough, and when you move out it looks like edge wear. I'd worry more about adding a bit of grime to it as well. Like if things look too clean and unused, then it just feels strange. It doesn't feel real, you know. So yeah, adding some dirt and grime to his belly and to his shoes there under his feet, and just adding edge wear to the clothes with a bit of grime on top of that. So as long as you don't overdo it, you should be fine. Here we go, more edge wear on the sandals. This is a bit of a clearer explanation of what I'm doing here. Concentrate on the edges, but don't overdo it. Same with the metal handles and things. So from here on, it's going to be a lot of the same. Edge wear, rough colours, grime on the top. So I'll let the time lapse play out. If you want to smooth anything like that, like the edge wear or the grime, set the brush to smooth and lower the strength all the way down, and it will smooth out your paint for you. It's really, really handy little way of smoothing out your paints and things. So you go with the base. I'm going to separate it out because it was feeling very cluttered. I think this does a much better job of making them feel like figurines, which is ultimately what I want to do. after I paint these. Add a bit of dirt into the creases and add a little bit of splash of green to simulate weeds maybe going through. I think at this point I move on to the lighting. So normally what I would use would be a 3-point light setup, but because they're 4 characters facing each other, it was difficult to put the backlight and the rim light on without washing out one character. So I didn't strictly do a 3-point light setup as much as I placed a main light for the sun and then moved other lights into position to bring some light and volume back into the shadows. But normally I would use a 3-point light setup, which I'll go over in my next video. That looks like that's everything, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, I'm really happy with this. Some nice rendering tools in here. I'll go over in more detail in another video, but if you guys liked this content, please feel free to share it, like it, subscribe. It'll help me out loads. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and happy sculpting.